Good evening from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. You are looking live at a far-field view of the uncrewed Roscosmos Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft, less than 10 kilometers away from the International Outpost, in the home stretch of its two-day journey to the International Space Station in this critical mission as the replacement spacecraft for the damaged Soyuz MS-22 vehicle that incurred a leak in its cooling system back on December 14th, rendering it usable only for emergency evacuation purposes. Soyuz MS-23 is honing in on the Poisk module docking port on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. That will be the ride home later this year for NASA's Frank Rubio and cosmonauts Sergei Prokopyev and Dmitry Petelin of Roscosmos. That trio launched on Soyuz MS-22 last September, but the damaged vehicle will now depart the station uncrewed, tentatively late next month, for an automated parachute-assisted landing in Kazakhstan for post-flight analysis by engineers. Here in Mission Control, NASA Flight Director Ed Van Cise is on console tonight with his team of flight controllers as they work with their counterparts at Mission Control in the town of Korolyov outside of Moscow, who are in charge of overseeing the automated approach and docking of the replacement Soyuz spacecraft to Poisk. The journey of this new Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft began on Thursday night, U.S. time, with its launch atop its Soyuz 2.1A booster from Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Soyuz had a perfect trip to orbit, separating from the third stage of its booster just under 9 minutes after liftoff, followed by the deployment of its solar arrays and navigational antennas. Over the past 48 hours, the Soyuz has executed a series of rendezvous maneuvers to close in on the International Space Station for a docking to Poisk that is scheduled at 7:01 p.m. Central Time, 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. The Soyuz has tested its core's automated rendezvous system and has activated its docking mechanism with a fly-around of the station expected less than 20 minutes from now, followed by a very brief period of station keeping before the approval is given for final approach, leading up to contact and capture of the Soyuz to the Poisk module. Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, who is the commander of the International Space Station, and Dmitry Petelin launched to the complex on what is now the damaged Soyuz craft on September 21st last year. Their return date on the new Soyuz vehicle that is closing in on the station has not yet been determined by Roscosmos and the International Space Station program, but the arrival of this new Soyuz will provide those crew members once again with a ride home on a completely healthy spacecraft. The International Space Station configuration at this moment is shown by the current configuration, the Crew 5 Crew Dragon, that is Endurance, that is docked to the station, the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft, along with the Soyuz MS-22, that damaged spacecraft that is docked to the Rosviet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. After docking occurs about 42 minutes from now, there will be that second and brand new Soyuz docked to the International Space Station, the Soyuz MS-23, that again will be the ride home for Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin later this year. Aboard the International Space Station, the Expedition 68 crew, including Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin, are awaiting Soyuz MS-23, carefully monitoring its approach to the complex. Prokopyev, Petelin, and cosmonaut Anna Kikina are in the Zvezda service module. They'll be prepared to issue a manual command to the Soyuz to abort its approach if necessary in the highly unlikely event the Corps' automated rendezvous system on the new MS-23 craft experiences a problem. There is no Toru or telerobotically operated backup rendezvous system on any Soyuz, only on the uncrewed Progress cargo vehicles. Normally, with a crew on board, the Soyuz commander would take over manual control to fly Soyuz in for a docking. But without a crew on board this particular Soyuz, there is still a capability to stop its approach by the cosmonauts inside the station if any problems occur with the Soyuz's trajectory toward its docking port. Instead of 3 crew members on board the Soyuz, that would be customary, this uncrewed Soyuz is carrying 946 pounds of supplies for the Expedition 68 crew on board the station. Assuming everything goes as planned and docking occurs just right after 7 p.m. Central Time, the cosmonauts will conduct leak checks at the docking interface between the Soyuz and the International Space Station before opening the Soyuz hatch just after 10 p.m. tonight to begin unloading its supplies. The transfer of Soyuz seed liners for Prokopiev and Petelin from the damaged Soyuz MS-22 and for Frank Rubio from the Crew 5 Crew Dragon vehicle is planned for next Friday, March the 3rd.
Reticles upwards from the copy. It looks like this is the vehicle. Station Moscow, space to ground 1. Go ahead, on space to ground 1. You are going to start command radio link test. Execute step 1.4. Copy 1.4 and work.
Over the past hour or so, the Soyuz has executed by automated computer command the series of rendezvous burns called impulse burns. Those are small mid-course correction maneuvers to fine-tune its path to the International Space Station. Its external television camera has been activated, as you're seeing in this view from a balcony camera in the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. Everything continues to proceed normally for a docking some 39 minutes from now that will bring the brand new Soyuz vehicle to the International Space Station and a healthy ride home, a brand new ride home for Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopiev, and Dmitry Petelin. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 miles above the South Atlantic in a trajectory from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, soon to cross the west coast of Africa on this particular orbit of the Earth.
Send the command. Command sent. Dmitry, first command is successful. Second command is also successful. How copy? Copy, thank you.
You're hearing the interpreted conversations between the Russian flight controllers and Korolyov and the crew on board the International Space Station as they have completed a series of tests on the Corps' automated rendezvous system.
Copy, page 6. Range 3.8, range rate negative 8.4, signal acquisition confirmed, station is 1.5 reticles off of the crosshairs. Copy. Sergei.
The Soyuz is now less than 4 kilometers away from the International Space Station.
Rendezvous thrusters a little bit later, around 2:15. The burn will be 5.63, running for 16.8 seconds.
And this is the view from the external cross-haired engineering television camera on the Soyuz MS-23. You can see in the lower left-hand corner the 3.3 kilometers. That is the range between Soyuz and the International Space Station, and the value underneath it is the rate of closure, currently just over 8 meters per second. The Soyuz will slow to a glacial 1/10 of a meter per second right before contact and capture between its forward docking probe and the Poisk module. Again, docking is currently scheduled some 36 minutes from now. While the Soyuz is in the final stages of its rendezvous for docking to the International Space Station down at the Kennedy Space Center. A launch readiness review is set to begin some 35 minutes or so from now. That will be the next step on the road for the Crew 6 crew members to launch in the early morning hours Monday morning at 12:45 a.m. Central Time, 1:45 a.m. Eastern Time on the Crew Dragon Endeavour for its ride on a Falcon 9 booster by SpaceX to the International Space Station and a docking in the wee hours of Tuesday morning. So multiple activities are underway in the realm of the International Space Station.
Range 2.550, range rate -7.5. Maneuver in progress, station on the screen moving to the right. TV mode is on.
Once again, there will be a continuing series of so-called impulse burns, small mid-course engine firings to fine-tune the Soyuz's path to the Poisk module. Everything continues to proceed on track. We are expecting the fly-around of the International Space Station to begin about 10.5 minutes from now. That will be a 69-degree fly-around by the Soyuz, all automated, to precisely align its forward docking probe with the Poisk module.
For the GSO summary. GSO summary on the screen. Standing by for attitude. Rendezvous thruster activation. Thruster activation confirmed at 3:26:43. Copy. Sergei, we may lose comm briefly at 3:30. If we don't have SG1, we'll move on to SHSS. Copy. Burn parameters 5.49. Maneuver to initial attitude is in progress. Standing by for the GSO summary. Seeing station on the screen. Station on the screen approaching the crosshairs. Copy.
And as you can hear,
summary is
the crew on board looking at the same view that you're looking at from the Soyuz external television camera and the first view from Soyuz of the International Space Station, now just 1.7 kilometers away from its docking port, closing at a rate of about 4 meters per second. The journey of the Soyuz MS-23 has been by the book since its launch about 48 hours ago from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. All of the pre-planned onboard automated engine firings have gone as planned, with no issues having been reported between the flight controllers at the Mission Control Center outside of Moscow and flight controllers here at the Johnson Space Center.
Enough to illuminate it now. Yes, we have very good visual of the ISS. AGA mode, 2 strokes. Range 1.4 minus 4.16 range rate. Station is slightly above the center. Copy.
Again, this is a view from a balcony camera overlooking the International Space Station Flight Control Room at Mission Control outside of Moscow in the town of Korolyov. The Russian flight controllers in control of overseeing the automated approach of the Soyuz MS-23 for its docking that is scheduled about 30 minutes from now.
Дальность 1200, минус 3,9 скорость. Захват есть, станция 2 клетки выше центра. Условие S1.71.037 и 37 поменялось на 77. Дальность 1000 метров, минус 3 скорость. Захват есть. Идет торможение.
Принято.
The next in the series of impulse burns or mid-course correction burns is underway. Everything is continuing to track right by the timeline. We're expecting the fly-around of the station to begin about 5.5 minutes from now.
Дальность 8,8, минус 2,4 скорость.
All the reports from the Russian Mission Control Center indicate normal operations by the rendezvous system on the Soyuz vehicle as it continues its methodical approach toward the Poisk module and its docking. The fly-around of the station will be executed at a range of about 400 meters.
Сергей, 3:33 через 600 будем пробовать разговаривать.
Я понял, принял. Через 10 секунд. Так, станция.
In 10 seconds, back to ISS. ISS goes slightly higher, range 730 minus 2.5 range rate. The ISS is 3 cells above the center. Copy. All right, now let's try with ISS, please.
The cosmonauts inside the Zvezda service module reporting a good visual of their own spacecraft being the International Space Station in the engineering view that they're seeing from the Soyuz vehicle. We will be acquiring the signal from the Soyuz vehicle when we pass over Russian ground stations a short time from now. The Impulse 6 burn, the mid-course correction burn, being conducted as we speak. This is the final scheduled maneuver before the start of the fly-around about 3 minutes from now. Once again, docking is scheduled at 7:01 p.m. Central Time. 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. The International Space Station currently crossing the west coast of Africa, moving from southwest to northeast. Assuming a nominal docking this evening, the cosmonauts will conduct leak checks at both sides of the docking interface between Soyuz and the Poisk module before opening up the hatches later tonight. Hatch opening scheduled just after 10 p.m. Central Time, and the cosmonauts then will go to work unloading some of the 946 pounds of supplies that are being carried up on this uncrewed Soyuz, replacing the presence of 3 crew members. And we have confirmation that the Soyuz has begun its automated fly-around of the station, about a 69-degree fly-around to precisely align its forward docking probe with the Poisk module. That will be followed by a very brief period of station keeping so that Russian flight controllers can assess the alignment of the Soyuz before proceeding with final approach for docking. This is Mission Control Houston. You're once again looking at a live view from a balcony camera at Mission Control outside of Moscow in the town of Kolyov, as the Russian flight controllers are monitoring the final minutes of the Soyuz MS-23, the uncrewed Soyuz's approach for its docking to the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station, with docking scheduled about 22.5 minutes from now. All of the rendezvous maneuvers, the engine firings have gone as planned. The Corps' automated rendezvous system has been tested and is locked in for final approach and contact and capture. We are currently in a period of loss of signal through our tracking and data relay satellite system in terms of video from the International Space Station. We should be acquiring video through Russian ground stations a short time from now. The fly-around of the station is continuing by the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23. It should be reaching that point of brief station keeping about 6 minutes from now. The cosmonauts on board the International Space Station in the Zvezda service module are seeing a good view of the Poisk docking port from the external television cameras on the Soyuz vehicle. Once again, we're moments away from acquiring the television signal from the Soyuz through Russian ground stations. The International Space Station and the Soyuz flying over Libya, moving from southwest to northeast. Less than 19 minutes away from the scheduled docking of the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23 to the Poisk module. We're standing by for an acquisition of signal from Soyuz through Russian ground stations. Soyuz spacecraft is conducting a roll program to properly orient itself prior to the initiation of final approach. Everything continues to proceed normally with the approach of the Soyuz to the International Space Station, standing by for the initiation of a brief period of station keeping, with the fly around of the station almost complete. The Soyuz MS-23 should be properly aligned now with the Poisk docking port, again on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station. And we now have confirmation that the vehicle is in station keeping. And there's the view from the Soyuz MS-23 with station keeping in progress at a distance of 183 meters separating the Soyuz from the Poisk docking port that is right around the center of the crosshairs that you're seeing in this view from the external engineering camera. Russian flight controllers are preparing to issue the commands to begin the final approach of the Soyuz for docking. Russian flight controllers have given approval for the initiation of final approach. And about 2 minutes ahead of schedule, the final approach has now been commanded. The Soyuz beginning the final leg of its 2-day journey to the International Space Station. Now 170 meters separating Soyuz and the Poisk module, closing at a rate of about 0.7 of a meter per second. We're about 7 minutes away from reacquiring our downlink video signal from the International Space Station through the tracking and data relay satellite system, but we are solid on video coming in from the Soyuz over Russian ground stations. The cosmonauts and the Zvezda service module are seeing the same view that you're seeing, as Soyuz is now about 130 meters away from its final destination. The docking target that is just underneath the docking port of the Poisk module itself should come into alignment with the center of the crosshairs on this engineering view as the Soyuz closes even further toward its final contact and capture. Less than 100 meters now separating Soyuz from the Poisk module. The International Space Station and Soyuz now flying over western Kazakhstan. 80 meters separating Soyuz from the station. So far, so good. A smooth and steady approach by the Soyuz, 65 meters away. Once again, you're looking at a view from the Soyuz external engineering camera. The docking target, that triangular object just underneath the docking port itself at the center of the crosshairs on this view, is the reference point to make sure that the approach of the Soyuz is in good alignment with the onboard computers that are bringing the Soyuz in for its automated docking through the core's automated rendezvous system, with just 44 meters separating Soyuz from Poisk. .30 meters now separating Soyuz from Poisk, continuing to push in for contact and capture in a nominal fashion.
Station Moscow, SG-1.
Экипаж МКС СУПа Москвы СГ-1.
Station Moscow, SG-1. Moscow Station, SG-1.
Принято, слышу вас.
Copy you, SG-1.
Very slow and methodical approach. Soyuz closing at about 1/10 of a meter per second, 25 meters away.
Moscow Station is John. How copy?
Я слышу вас.
Copy, loud and clear. Well, there is the procedure for SVP readiness on the axis of the docking port. The range now is about 15 meters. Copy. AR antenna base is confirmed. Copy. Target is in the center of the vehicle. There are slight oscillations. Let me check. But do you have visual of the target? Yes, we have visual. Try to play with the AGA mode by one division or so. Okay, now we have good visual of the target. Copy.
Now our first view of the Soyuz MS-23, the uncrewed Soyuz, less than 15 meters away from docking to the Poisk module.
In the center. Copy.
Moving into an orbital sunrise, flying over southern Russia.
Excellent visual of the target. It's a little bit below and to the left from the center. Crosshairs aligned.
The crew verifying the alignment of the Soyuz forward docking probe to the Poisk module.
And aligned with the docking port. The range is about 9 meters. Copy.
Inside 10 meters now.
Range is 6 meters.
6 meters away, standing by for contact and capture.
Copy. The target is slightly to the right. 3 meters waiting for contact. Copy. The target is 1 cell below. Waiting for contact. And we're looking for capture.
Contact.
Contact confirmed.
And capture. Docking confirmed.
Indicator mode.
At 6:58 p.m. Central Time, 7:58 p.m. Eastern Time.
Did you see the message on the left
as the International Space Station and Soyuz MS-23 flew 260 miles over northern Mongolia.
Sergey, Dima, Anya, congratulations with successful docking. Thank you so much for excellent work done. All right.
And the docking probe now beginning to retract.
You have more activities ahead of you. Okay, now I'm handing the mic to...
It couldn't have gone smoother from launch to docking.
The interface leak checkout.
The new ride home for Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin has arrived at the International Space Station. Once again, docking occurred at 6:58 p.m. Central Time, 7:58 p.m. Eastern Time, as Soyuz and the International Space Station flew 260 miles over northern Mongolia. It was smooth and uneventful every step of the way. The new Soyuz, uncrewed, has arrived at the International Outpost. The docking probe retraction will bring the two docking interfaces between Soyuz and the Poisk module into flush contact with one another. There will be a short period to allow relative motion to dampen out between the two vehicles. And at that point, the initiation of the closing of the hooks between the docking interfaces will begin to form a hard mate. Once the hard mate is complete, leak checks will begin by the cosmonauts on their side of the docking interface, leading to the opening of the hatches between Soyuz and the Poisk module shortly after 10 p.m. Central Time tonight.
Go ahead and as you want. RS, drop out. Please say it again. We did not copy you. On SUDE-N format, is prime. SUDE-NRS is master. Copy.
And the closing of the hooks now in progress. And we are standing by. There is the confirmation we've just received. Hooks are closed, so we now have a hard mate between the newly arrived Soyuz MS-23 and the Poisk module. This is the replacement spacecraft for the damaged Soyuz MS-22. And the MS-23 now will be the ride home for Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin later this year. Everything from launch through docking went precisely by the book. No issues whatsoever on this automated flight of the brand new Soyuz to the International Space Station, providing Rubio, Prokopyev, and Petelin with a ride home on a healthy spacecraft. With that, next up is the launch of Crew 6 on board the SpaceX Crew Dragon Endeavour that is scheduled for early Monday morning. Launch coverage from the Kennedy Space Center, the Johnson Space Center, and SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California will get underway tomorrow night at 9:15 p.m. Central Time, 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time, leading to an expected launch of Crew Dragon and its crew, Commander Steve Bowen, pilot Woody Hoberg, and crewmates Sultan Al-Niyati of the United Arab Emirates and Andrei Fedyaev of Roscosmos. That launch scheduled Monday at 12:45 a.m. Central Time, 1:45 a.m. Eastern Time. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage from here at the Johnson Space Center for this evening. A flawless rendezvous and docking by the Soyuz MS-23, bringing a new ride home to the station for Frank Rubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin. We will be back with you tomorrow night for launch coverage of the Crew 6 crew to the International Space Station. In the meantime, have a good evening. This is Mission Control Houston.